Hello, hello. All right, thank you everybody for the early birds that were patient with us. Logan and I had to figure out audio video issues like we do every time. I keep promising we're going to switch to a more modern audio video solution. I just keep punting that down the road as other things come up. But thank you for everybody for showing up. My name is Ryan. I'm the CEO at Gust, Ryan Nash. I'm joined today by Logan Burchett from Forecastr. We're roughly doing almost an event a month with them because it seems to really resonate with our audience, both our Gust launch customers who tend to be a really good fit for what they need, as well as broadening it to the larger Gust community of just anybody who's looking to raise that funding round to, just amp up their startup and really take the next step. So today, I'm pleased to share, I think, a updated presentation around the power of a financial model. We're not going to go over lemonade stands, I've heard this time around, but something a little bit different.
Gonna be a little bit.
But excellent. So Logan's going to do most of the talking, and we'll share some helpful resources afterwards, as well as a discount to Forecastr services if you find them helpful. Everybody seems to. We get rave reviews about them. And the one thing I've also learned about why GoToWebinar is not great is none of you can use the chat. Only I can use the chat, and that is a feature of GoToWebinar. But there is this Q&A thing. So if you have questions throughout, questions for me, questions for Logan, just add them to the QA. I will bring them up if they're super relevant to the material Logan's covering in the moment. And then we'll save some time for a Q&A at the end as well to just get general purpose questions, or if you ask ones throughout that don't really fit well or the conversation's moved on. Mitch is also here, one of Forecastr's team members, and he'll probably help me out with some of the questions as well. So without further ado, Logan, introduce yourself, tell us about Forecastr, and take us on a journey.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Ryan. And I'm actually going to go ahead, and so we can do this on the front end and try to get this to where we can show my screen. So I'm going to go show, and we're going to look at the financial modeling. Okay, there we go. Can we see my screen here? Did I not break it? I assume we're good. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining.
Hold on a second. I actually don't see your screen.
You don't see my screen. Okay. That's
Mitch,
great.
help me out here. Am I? Okay, I'm not the only one. Anthony Glenn says he can't see it either.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Now
There we go. There we go. Yep, we good.
There's a show button apparently that you have to click after you've clicked selected the screen that you want to show. So yeah, thanks for everybody in the audience while I stumble over this learning curve of GoToWebinar. So, but either way, thanks everyone for joining me in the Forecastr team today for Financial Modeling 101. We're always super excited to be giving this talk with Gust, and like Ryan said, this is going to be a slightly updated presentation. So if you've seen this before, there'll be a little bit more, some new content here for you all. But this is a presentation that is really near and dear to my heart because I've worked with a lot of companies over my career, and I've had a lot of really promising looking companies that have ended up ultimately failing. And it's not because their business model was broken or because they weren't getting good traction or anything like that, but I've seen some that have just simply lacked the resources and the know-how to adequately forecast. And whenever that happens, you'll see companies end up running out of cash. It's really tragic. We never want to see that happen to any company, but these types of things happen all the time. So a lot of the content that I'm going to be going over today is really going to help you put up guardrails so that you can ensure that you don't fall into a similar situation. So we're going to dive into some of the basics of financial modeling, and we'll go into things like what is a financial model? What are the benefits of financial modeling, impacts financial models can have on a company. And I also want to keep this hands-on. So I know Mitch is going to be in the chat and Ryan will be in there as well. So we'll try to keep it pretty hands-on, pretty interesting for you all. A lot of content to cover, so we're just going to go ahead and jump in right away. And I always like to start off presentations by talking about the objectives. So what are the things that I hope to cover, and what are the things that I really want to impart onto you by the time the presentation is over? And for us, it really comes down to two things. I want to convey the power of a financial model, so the types of things that a financial model can really help you do, and I think you'll see that there's a lot. Particularly though, I want to dive into how it can help you raise money and it can help you run your business better. So I think we can all agree that those are two really, really important things, really, really hard things. So we're going to dive into each of those two things separately. And then I want to talk a little bit about how to properly build a financial model. So we'll go over some of the best practices, and then we'll actually dig into an example ourselves, so that you can take a lot of what we talk about today and hopefully operationalize it along with some resources that we can give you for yourselves. And then just to run through a really quick agenda, we're going to talk about why financial modeling is important and then the purpose of it. We'll walk through what a true investor grade financial model looks like, and we'll talk about how you can build a financial model on your own and then how you can use it once it's actually built. And before we get into that, I do want to give you a really quick intro about myself. So as Ryan mentioned, I'm Logan. I'm co-founder, chief operating officer here at Forecastr. And I'm a finance nerd. I've been in finance for pretty much my entire career. So I started off working at the Kentucky Pension Fund. I was managing their stock portfolio, and I eventually left that to become a fractional CFO for dozens of venture-backed startups. It's really where I learned to hone my craft. It's also what led me into starting Forecastr, but even more importantly, it's what led me to meet my co-founder, Steven. Co-founders can be really important, and he and I really hit it off. And between the two of us, we built hundreds of financial models. We both raised money from investors. And I'm a finance mentor at Gust, Techstars, New Chip, GSV Labs. I know the startup game better than most folks you're likely to meet, which is a really weird thing to brag about, but there it is for you. So if you have any finance questions after this, I'm your guy. I also want to go over what is Forecastr. And Forecastr is an online software that helps founders build great financial models so that they can understand their numbers, make better decisions, and then get funded. And really the heart of what we're doing is we're trying to make forecasting easier and more meaningful for founders and investors. Because as you'll see, as I talk about it and we really dig into the presentation, we love forecasting. We think it's the most powerful thing that you can do for your company. But we really hate Excel, which is funny because we were pros at Excel. We were experts. We sold our Excel skills for many, many years. But we don't like Excel really. Excel's clunky. It's hard to learn. And above all, it's unstandardized. So that means that every model looks different. One model from somebody on this call is going to look way different from everybody else's model from everybody else on the call. It's unstandardized, and that means it's really hard to compare or automate data or anything like that. And that's why Forecastr is so great, because every model is still unique, but it's standardized in our platform. So that way you can compare yourself to cohorts, you can link up all of your data sources, you can share it way easier. It just makes you a lot smarter and more efficient. We also have a team of experts that's going to help you along the way from the initial build of your model to any ongoing questions that you have. So if you're interested in Forecastr, we'll send you a beta application out. Mitch, if you're able, maybe see if we can drop a beta application for Gust here in the chat. We encourage everybody to apply, and we'd love to chat with all of you. Okay, so now I want to move into the content, and I really want to kick things off just by making sure that we're all 100% on the same page for what a financial model is. It's funny because whenever you're kind of in the field of financial modeling, you start to see that there's a lot of nuances. And sorry, were you going to say something, Ryan? I heard something. Nope, maybe not.
Nope, I just confused my mute buttons.
Oh,
sorry.
I heard you take a breath. I was like, oh, okay, he wants to chime in. Okay, cool. No, I'll keep going. Yeah, no, it's funny whenever you're kind of in the financial modeling space, you start to understand that, not everybody has that holistic understanding of what really is a financial model. You ask 100 different people what it is, you get 100 different answers. So I want to kick things off by going through an analogy that I think is really powerful whenever it comes to explaining what a financial model is. And I do not own this analogy, by the way. This was coined by the great Troy Hennicoff. He was the former MD of Techstars Chicago. He runs Math Venture Partners up in Chicago now, but he has a really good analogy that I really like. It goes like this. So if you look at these slides, way back in the early days of car manufacturing, the design phase looked kind of like it does in the pictures here on this slide. So you'd have these engineers, they'd build out these full-scale clay replicas of their designs, and then they'd have to build full-on prototypes of these replicas. So then once you've had this brand new, never tested car built, you'd have to find some really brave person to go in and test this prototype in real time. So you'd have these testers, they'd jump into these unproven machines, they'd have to take them for a spin. And sometimes they'd work and everything was great, but then sometimes it'd try to hit that, hair point turn, the 90-degree turn, it'd flip into a barrel roll 3 times and it'd blow up. You never knew though until you built it. So you basically have to create an entire car just to see if the concept works. And a lot of times it didn't, and it was back to the drawing board. So then you'd have to iterate on this over and over and over again, spend millions of dollars, and then a lot of time later, maybe you'd have a car, maybe you don't. But it's kind of a broken process. It's really crazy by today's standards because obviously you're wasting a ton of time, you're wasting a ton of money building out these early models. Not only that, you're risking lives. It's really dangerous. So it's not a great process. So fast forward to today, we thank God for technology because today cars are built soup to nuts using software. So they can be designed and tested in minutes using software and not months and months. You can build a virtual car and then you can have it drive on a virtual track and you can have it take a virtual 90-degree turn. And sometimes it'll still flip over 3 times and explode, but that's okay. If it flips into a barrel roll, nobody's hurt. You tweak some components, you lower the center of gravity maybe, you put it on the track again, and then you keep trying until you get it right. And the idea of building out a full-on working physical prototype before any software testing is completely laughable these days. And we think this is a really great analogy for a financial model because in the same way, we can use technology to simulate our businesses and run tests in minutes instead of years. You can see what happens when you add that new product line or you try that new marketing channel or you invest in that sales force, so you hire that person. And early on, you can even understand, is your business viable? Or do I need to switch up my entire business model? But that way, you can see if a business handles that sharp 90-degree turn. Is it going to flip into a barrel roll or is it going to be okay? But that way, if there's issues, nobody gets hurt, you don't get hurt, your investors don't get hurt, your co-founders don't get hurt, and it really gives you a chance to optimize before you dive in head first and waste a lot of time and money. So if you really frame it around this lens of creating a holistic simulation of your business, I think you'll start to really see the power of a financial model. So it's really important that we kind of get into that mindset. Now, I've thrown a lot of analogies out at you, but I want to talk more practically now about why we build a financial model. When it comes down to it, there's really 2 value propositions of a great financial model, and I referenced these earlier, and they're obviously incredibly important value propositions. The first thing that a financial model is going to do is it's going to help you impress investors, and it's going to help you raise capital easier. I say this because the best way to communicate with an investor is with their own language, and a lot of times that is the language of finance. So it can help you understand your cash position, it can help you articulate your growth strategy, and it'll help you express kind of your intentions with the capital and your expenses with your investors. Financial model can also give an investor a clue onto your understanding of your own business. It's kind of a separator in that way, because if you don't feel confident or fully understand your business, a lot of that comes out whenever you're trying to articulate your financial plan to an investor, and that is done through a financial model. So super important when it comes to raising money, just to segment that. It's also going to help you run your business better. Again, a financial model, it's really important that we get into that mindset. It is a simulation of your business. So it'll allow you to make informed decisions. It'll help you figure out the best ways to spend money in order to manage your runway. It'll also allow you to create a multitude of scenarios to find out your optimal path. So these are 2 really, really important things, important reasons that you should look in to getting a great financial model. I want to talk now a little bit about the expected output of a financial model. So what are the things that my financial model needs to produce in order for me to have appropriate communication with my investors to make these types of informed decisions? So the output of a financial model comes in the form of 3 statements. I'm sure some folks on this call have heard of some or all of these statements at some point, but we're going to go over at a very high level what each of these means. So we have the income statement, and this is the statement that shows you how much money a company is making or losing over time. So this is where you're going to report on things like revenue and expenses, and it'll show you what your net income is for the company. but it's also showing you things over a span of time. So it's kind of it over, the past 6 months, the past year, the past 18 months, whatever. How much money did I make? How much money did I spend? Am I profitable or am I not profitable? That's the income statement in a nutshell. Now, the balance sheet, on the other hand, shows you what the company owns or owes at any point in time. So that's just taking inventory of like your cash, what people owe you, all of that stuff. It's just what do we own? And then the statement of cash flows is really important because it sits in between those two statements. And it's just trying to tell the story of what's happening to cash at any point in time. Cash is constantly changing. It's something that obviously we're all really, really focused on. You could argue that's one of the main reasons that we build a financial model is to understand cash better. So it's so important that it has its own statement. That's the statement of cash flows. And because there's so many moving pieces of a financial model, a lot of times we're asked, what are the most important things to focus on? What are the things that I need to spend the majority of my time on in order to make sure I'm hitting home with investors and making sure that I am appropriately simulating my business? And by far, the most important thing that you need to focus on when building a financial model is revenue. Revenue is the hardest thing to predict. It's the most difficult thing to control. It's the reason most people end up failing is that they don't end up hitting their revenue targets. Usually if you're meeting or exceeding expectations on revenue, you can at least get funding. It's really revenue that causes a lot of companies not to make it. And because revenue is so important, it's really important that you understand what your revenue formula is so that you can identify all of the key drivers that go into calculating revenue. So once you fully understand your revenue formula, you can understand the different things that you have control over that can really impact revenue. So I want to make sure that we all understand what I mean whenever I say revenue formula, and I want to dive in to a specific example of that right now. So I'm going to start here. Okay, cool. So this is the revenue formula for a subscriptions business. And before we dig in too far into this, I'm going to keep it really high level. And I'm going to call out that we built this intentionally. You're going to see it's going to look like a tree-like structure so that you can understand the subcomponents of each metric and how each individual metric is calculated. I'll also have you notice that we keep all of the input metrics colored purple. And inputs here are defined as things that we have either direct or indirect control over. So these are things that we can change and optimize over time, or these are things that we can just flip a switch and change. The goal of the revenue formula is to start at the highest level, and then we're going to dive deeper and deeper into each individual metric until we get to the point where all of our bases are these purple input metrics. So in this case, we can start at the highest level, which shows that price, that revenue equals price times subscriptions. And you'll notice that my price is a purple input. It's something that we have direct control over, but my subscriptions is a lot more nuanced than that. There's a lot that goes into actually calculating my subscribers. So if I go one layer deep on subscribers, we can see that my subscribers equals my subscribers at the beginning of the month minus any subscribers that left me plus any new subscribers that I got within that month. Now we can further see that the number of subscribers that we lost is calculated by taking the subscribers that I had last month, and then we're going to multiply that by the percentage that churned, which is that purple input metric. There's a lot of different ways that I can get new subscribers though, and we can see that in my revenue formula. So I can get new subscribers from Google, I can get new subscribers from email, I can get new subscribers from Facebook. I can keep this going on and on and on and on. So what we would want to do is we want to understand the math that goes into each individual customer acquisition channel. But I don't want to get too crazy here. I'm going to keep it simple and high level. So I'm just going to dive into Google for this example. So here we can see that our new subscribers from Google is our traffic from Google multiplied by our conversion rate. And now our conversion rate is a purple input metric because we have indirect control over it, right? Our traffic though is something that we can in theory control through our monthly budget divided by our cost per click. And because we have direct control over that, both of these are going to be purple input metrics. So if we wanted to control our traffic to Google, therefore our new subscribers, therefore our total subscribers, therefore our revenue, we could A, spend more money on paid ads, B, we could find cheaper keywords, reducing our cost per click, or C, we could increase our conversion rate through some sort of optimization and testing. We can also increase revenue over time by reducing churn. So lower churn would decrease the amount of subscribers that we lose over time, which would increase our number of subscribers, which would increase revenue. So if you take like 10 steps back, we can really, I think, start to see the true power of the revenue formula, because there's really only 5 purple input metrics on this entire slide. And that means that there's really only 5 things that we have direct or indirect control over that can ultimately impact revenue. So we can modify our price, our churn rate, our conversion rate, our budget on paid ads, or our cost per click. So really, it's our job as owners of the business to find out which one of those levers has the highest impact, and then we're going to focus and really try to optimize those levers over time until we're generating the maximum amount of revenue that we possibly can. Okay, so now I want to dive into a very specific example. This is an example of a business called Dollar Cave Club. It's kind of a cheeky business that Troy Hinikoff, the guy that came up with the car analogy, he made up, and I'm stealing this from him, just like I stole the car analogy from him earlier. But I'm going to pause for about a minute. I'm going to let everybody read this prompt, and then I'm going to come back, and then we're going to dive into this together and run a few exercises. Okay.
Oh, before you jump into that, I got one relevant question on your previous slide, the previous slide to that one. Yep. Kyle asks, how important is it to have churn rate on the model? Would it raise a big red flag if it's not there? And I'm assuming he means possibly a red flag with investors.
Yeah, if you're ignoring churn, then that would definitely be, I think, a red flag to the investors, because churn is going to be a super important metric, especially if you're a SaaS company. It's arguably one of the most important metrics. Some folks might even put that above revenue, just because if you have a large churn rate, that means leaky bucket. A lot of investors won't touch a company that's just churning left and right. So it's really important to at least articulate that you're thinking about churn and that you're planning for churn, and that that kind of like enters into your equation. So I would say, if you're asking like, would it be a red flag if you're a SaaS business and you don't have churn in your model, I'd say absolutely. That would be a red flag to an investor.
And I'd say even models that are not predominantly, it's really easy to think about churn as in SaaS, and Kyle follows on like, what's a reasonable rate to anticipate, like 5 to 7, depending on your model and market. Think about what might be in the place of churn. Say you're selling big ticket like yearly sponsorships or something like that. Your churn rate isn't the people that are unsubscribing every month, but your ability to get a follow-on sponsorship the year later or something like that, or turning a client into something that continually becomes a revenue source, or buying again. And even, I'm sure we'll get into it with I'm excited for the Cave Club thing, because it's new to me too. But even physical products that sell transactional based things, they think of churn not as, well, you bought my whatever once, like you're a customer. It's like follow-on products. What other product lines do you have, or is there refreshers or refillers or something like that that's necessary? And I think reasonableness is really going to depend on your business model, market, and the target market. If you're targeting billionaires as opposed to consumers, churn rates will go up and down. But I think Logan would probably have some more details in that as we jump into the example.
Big time, big time. And yeah, it really all just comes down to like articulating your understanding of your unit economics and understanding kind of like the general revenue formula that you have for your company, right? So like, if I get one customer, I'm going to want to understand, okay, if they're paying me, let's just use this example. If they're paying me monthly, how many months do I have that they're going to be around? Like, does my average customer stick around for 3 months, 10 months, 2 years, 5 years, whatever? And like, it's really important that we know that, right? And it's very important, obviously, from an investor standpoint to understand if somebody's paying you X, how many times are they going to be paying you that? How long are they sticking around? And like Ryan said, it's really regardless of business model, just understanding like repeat purchase behavior, just to get a really deep understanding of the unit economics of your business. I think it's going to be really important, kind of not even if you're not raising money, just really important to know in general. So, and I think you'll see that whenever we get into our next example. And I will try to keep this one pretty interactive. And if I switch tabs, yes, it looks like we can see my new tab. So that's really cool.
Yeah, you look good.
Cool. All right. So this is the Dollar Cave Club financial model. So we've got a bunch of stuff kind of built out for us here. And I won't spend a ton of time going through kind of structure stuff, but I'll hit high level. Just we've got customer acquisition, which shows us how we're getting new customers. You can see that Dollar Cave Club's looking for, they're just getting organic website traffic. They're also investing in paid ads. They're investing in Google ads, and they're getting a bunch of customer referrals too. That's going to feed into their revenue streams. So it's going to say, this is how you're getting customers. This is now how you're going to be monetizing those customers. And you can see here how their revenue is going to be growing over time. But right now we have a decision to make because we're looking at our subscribers and we see right now that our churn rate is 4% and that we charge $29.99 per month for our product, for our Dollar Cave Club product. So what I want to do is I want to go all the way out, all the way to the very end of my model, and I want to look at our balance sheet. And I'm going to scroll way over here to the right, and I want to see how much cash I'm currently projecting at the end of my model. Okay, cool. So October 2027, that's whenever my model ends. I'm currently saying that we're going to have $1.51 million in cash in this current scenario. This is our default scenario. This is our operating scenario right now. At the end of the model, about $1.5 million in cash. So let me ask you all this. If I go in here and I'm going to edit this subscribers and I'm going to go down, I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to go down to my price and I want to double that. It's $29.99. I want to double that to roughly 60. Do we think that cash is going to double, more than double, or less than double? And I'll ask that everybody kind of put their answers in the chat. And Ryan, I'll let you guess maybe before we reveal the answer as well. Mitch already knows the answer to this. He's seen this.
I'm going to say you should triple it. I mean, we're doing business here.
Triple the price, yeah. Going up. We got any guesses tripling in?
We got two more than double.
Okay.
Arun, Siva, and Kyle.
Cool. Are people allowed to come off mute? Is that a thing? Or is that?
Yeah, we can pull people off mute if anybody raises their hand.
If anybody if you're feeling brave and if you wanna talk about why you think that might be fun. Huh?
I don't know if we have any brave in. I'm watching for hands.
All right. All right. Well, no.
Oh wait, we got some. We got the two suggested, so I'll get the first one in. So Arun, give me 1 second. I will make you speaking. I've unmuted you, Arun Siva.
Yeah. So Logan, I think the reason why it's going to be more than double is you're just increasing the revenue, not modifying the cost, because your cost is same. You just increase the revenue, and obviously the other parameters are going to be the same. You just doubled it. So obviously with the same cost, you are going to just increase the revenue significantly.
Yep. So we don't actually know that though, because, and this is probably something that I should have said, but we do have cost of goods sold in here that is going to be a percentage of revenue. So as we increase that revenue, we are going to have costs that are going to scale with it.
I didn't know that. Okay. I didn't realize that.
Thanks for the bravery. I'll also bring up Anthony Glenn. Unmute you right now, Anthony, if you want to add some commentary. It's dangerous that I get to unmute people.
I know.
Anthony, you might have to activate your mic, even though I unmuted you. Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
It's not as rude as to force audio into your home.
Okay. Well, the thought that crossed my mind is, shouldn't we be, or should we be adjusting for churn? I'm assuming at that higher per month value price, more people are going to likely to churn, or is that a logical assumption?
No, that's a great thing to call out, and you're getting slightly ahead of me there. Right now, we're just going to see what happens if all we do is increase price. But you're absolutely right. There's going to be downstream effects if we increase price. Our churn may go up, our conversion rates may go down. You know, there's a number of things that could happen.
Got it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well,
that is the hands, and I'm going to ask this question for Lee just in case it's relevant and not answered, but if it is a little bit later in the thing, just let me know and we can bring it up later. But Lee Honeywell asks, any recommendations on churn calculations when you operate on an annual contract basis? Do investors expect churn by customer number or contract value?
Yeah, let's dig into that one maybe towards the end, but that is a good question. We can make sure that we come back to that.
Great.
We also do annual subscriptions here at Forecastr, so pretty.
We also do annual subscriptions at Gust Launch.
Yeah, so you can get maybe a couple of perspectives on that, so that'll be nice. Cool. Well, I am going to reveal how we're looking here. So remember, just as a reminder, it was originally 1.51 million. So I'm going to scroll all the way out here. All we've done is double price, and you can see now it's almost $8 million, 7.67 million. So anybody want to guess why that might be? Why, if all we do is double price, our cash is so much higher? It's what, 4 times higher, roughly? More than 4 times, 5 times higher?
I lowered everybody's hands in case somebody's hands popped up in response to that.
It's a little bit more of a tricky question, but if anybody wants to try their hand at it.
I believe there's famous quotes around this question.
I don't know what you're referring to, but if I'll say this, generally the reason that your cash is going to be so much higher is because they're not just paying you $30 more one time, and this is where churn comes in. They're paying you $30 more every single month. So every month, you know, I had $30 more this month, and then next month I get another $30 more, and then the next month I get another $30 more, and so on and so forth and so forth. So the cumulative effect isn't just a 2x, it's actually significantly higher than that. So that's going to go, and even though costs are going to increase because I showed, you know, we have a percentage of the revenue that's going to scale with it, you're still collecting a lot of that to the bottom line because, you know, those costs are going to scale. You have cost of goods sold that will scale, but then you have other costs like people and like rent and, you know, just other kind of operating costs that aren't going to scale with you quite as much. So that's why, you know, I think churn is so important, and that's, you know, why financial models are so important, because there's really no way that we could have possibly run that experiment just now without building a financial model, without actually running through it and understanding kind of like what full-on downstream impacts a doubling in price could potentially have to our business. But like it was brought up earlier, there are other things that could happen if I increase my price by a factor of 2. So my churn rate right now is 4%. What do you all think will happen if I double my churn rate? I double my price, and then I also double my churn rate. We were at 1.51 before. Are we going to be worse off, better off, the same? Anybody want to throw their guesses in the chat this time?
Kyle says worse off.
Worse off. All right. This is a really hard question, by the way.
Yeah, so restating this, we are doubling the price and doubling churn simultaneously.
Exactly. We double price, double churn.
Arun also guesses worse off.
Worse off. All right, we got 2 worse off. Start moseying over here so we can uncover this. So we're going to scroll all the way out over here. We are still much better off. So we are 1.51 and now we're 4.59. So well over double, almost, is that triple? Yeah, triple, over triple actually, cash. So if we increase price by double, we can afford to double our churn and we'd still be better off. Okay, well, what happens if we triple our churn? You know, what if I say it's not going to be 8%? What if it goes to 12%?
Oh, we had some more worse offs in the chat.
It's more worse off. All right, what do we think now?
No, it's not worse off. Yeah, that was from the first modeling. But while you're up,
all right.
Kyle's sticking to his guns. He says now it's going to be worse off. Triple broke the camel's back.
I'll tell you right now, I don't even know. So we're gonna find out together. All right, so I'm gonna go in here. I'm gonna look at cash. I go way out over here.
It's still better off. Yeah.
Still almost better. So this is why it is so powerful to build a financial model, because what we can do together right now is we could keep going back and forth with this, and I can make this 16%. I can make this 20%. I can make this 50%. And then we could just keep doing this until eventually we would hit a number where we are essentially break even, right? Until eventually we're going to get to a point where it's just going to be 1.51, and this might even be close to that point right here, 1.77. So we're getting close. So we now know that if I double my price, my churn can increase from 4 times, and I'll still be better off. So we can run an experiment to back that up, right? We could, for the next 100 customers, offer $60 instead of $29.99, and we could take that cohort and we could measure what churn is on that cohort. And we know that if churn is anything less than whatever it ends up being, like 18%, whatever that break-even point is, if churn is less than that, we're better off. So that now means that we have improved our business by increasing prices. So in theory, if we increase prices and our churn goes from 4 to like 6 or 7, that's a huge, huge, huge win for our business, right? Because we know it can go all the way up to 17, 18%, and we'd still be better off. And this isn't a perfect example because churn might not be the only thing that's affected by this, right? We're assuming right now that churn is the only impacted variable. That may not be the case, right? I've got a bunch of customer acquisition channels. I've got a bunch of assumed conversion rates by channel. All of those will likely be affected by this as well. So, what we can do is, again, we can A/B test and we can control for the variables that we know. I can look at what my conversion rates per channel were for $30 or $29.99. I could offer $60. I could measure the impact. I could put those in my financial model and hold those steady because we know those are roughly going to be the impact. And then I could isolate churn and understand what can my churn increase to before I'm better off. And this is really where the power of financial modeling comes in. It starts to make a lot of sense why investors are interested in this, right? Because I've now got a simulation that I built for my business that I can ask it any question that I want to. If I increase prices, what can my churn fall to? What can my conversion rates fall to? If I triple my paid ad spend, what will that do to revenue? What will that do to cash? How much money will I raise? If I hire this marketing professional, what kind of impact will they have? And will I need to raise more money for that? If my accounts receivable, if I take 5 days longer to get paid on average, what's that going to do to cash 5 years later? It's kind of a you can't really call it a crystal ball because our answers aren't 100% perfect, but it will give you the best directional feedback of any business tool out there when it comes to making large strategic decisions for your business. I do want to call on one other thing as well before we jump back into the slides, and that is if I'm looking at revenue, there's something that I'm starting to notice whenever I'm looking at this revenue graph. And I think you all are probably noticing it too. It's that one of these bars on this revenue graph is significantly bigger than any of these other bars, right? This subscribers bar is generating per month $895,000 in revenue versus add-on purchases, which is 41, versus advertising, which is $1,000 roughly, just $1,000. So if I'm looking at that advertising line, I'm wondering, okay, well, what do I have to do to make this interesting for me? So let's look at like my CPM. Right now it's 4. Let's just go bananas and let's say that's 20. We're going to increase that all the way up to 20. We're going to work really, really hard on this channel. What does that do? And you can see it basically does nothing. I mean, it goes from $1,000 to $6,000 compared to $950,000 thereabouts in revenue. I can tell you right now, I can put pretty much any number in here and it's not going to move the needle, right? It's not really going to do anything that's interesting to me on revenue. So this is another really important thing that a financial model can help you do. It can help you focus, because what I've now learned is that I need to just delete this advertising revenue line, right? There's nothing I can do to make it interesting, and it's a distractor. It's completely distracting for my business. And so just as easily as it's showing you what you do need to focus on, in this case, trying to extract more value out of your customers by increasing price or perhaps upsells, it can tell you what not to focus on, which in this case is advertising, and then to an extent, add-on purchases as well. So any questions before we jump back into the slides? We have, I think, maybe 3 or 5 more slides that we can go through.
Yeah, Logan, quick question from Stacy. So back to like the churn question. She has an e-commerce business, so she's asking like recommendations on how to display or talk about churn for like a typical e-com business.
Yeah, it's different for e-com because it's not, it is in a sense churn, but it's almost more thought of as like repeat purchases. So the amount of people that are coming back and purchasing from you over and over and over again. And I know this is a very common metric in the e-commerce world. Functionally, from a financial modeling standpoint, it is essentially the inverse of churn. So if my churn is saying 5% of my customers, 5% of my subscribers are leaving every month, then you could replace that with a repeat purchases metric, which is basically saying X% of my previous batch of folks that made a purchase are purchasing again. And it's a good way to articulate brand loyalty and showing that you can get customers to actually stick around month after month after month, so that whenever you're growing, it's not a completely leaky bucket. You're able to retain some customers and some folks are coming back. And it's even better if you can show that they're not only coming back, but they're coming back and purchasing higher package or higher dollar packages as well. It's a great question.
And I'm sure they'll ask in the chat. You can model that with Forecastr, right? Whether or not it's a churn percentage or repeat purchase or.
Absolutely. Yep. So like if you've got it kind of like if I clicked e-commerce, then you'd be able to see, I could go to advanced and you'll even be able to see the returning customers is what we call it here. Returning customers, calculating it as the previous months plus the returning customer rate. And that is an input variable, is that returning customer rate. That's easy to do here in Forecastr. But we got about 15 minutes left. I do want to keep it here for Q&A. So I'm going to jump into the next slide, which is how do we build a financial model? So there's a lot that actually goes into building out a financial model. So I'm not really going to be able to go through all of that content here today. But I do want to talk super high level in order to provide a little bit of tips and pointers on this subject. And step one, really the most important step is the one that we just talked about, which is starting with your revenue formula. It's super, super important to understand it and try to construct it. So try to, do it however you'd like. Get into a PowerPoint or get a pen and paper, whatever makes the most sense for you. But try to create that tree for yourself. Try to identify all of those inputs, then try to simulate that revenue formula through a financial model using Excel, or come to us at Forecastr and we'll walk you through that entire process. In order to help do that, we just saw in the Forecastr example, you're going to need to understand your customer acquisition channels. So what are the ways that you're getting new customers, and then understand the math behind each of those as well. It's super important to articulate that growth strategy for investors. It's really great to show them how you're actually planning on growing. It's also really important for you to articulate your costs. So we have cost of goods sold in here. Those are those costs that are going to be growing with revenue. So we kind of touched on that whenever we were going through the Dollar Cave Club example. So you're going to want to make sure that those scaling expenses are accounted for. You're also going to want to make sure that those expenses that don't quite scale with revenue in the same way are accounted for. And those are found in your hiring plan and your operating expenses. So those are things like headcount, rent, all of that good stuff. You're also going to want to forecast the stuff that you own. So that's your cash, your accounts receivable, debt, all of that stuff. You're also going to look at the things that you owe, so your liabilities and your equity as well. So that's really what's going to put together the balance sheet and make sure that you're forecasting cash appropriately. And then once all of this is done, you're going to want to put it all together on a monthly income state, and then you're going to want a monthly balance sheet and a statement of cash flows. And you're going to want those annualized as well, just in case investors are going to want to see, hey, by year, kind of what do your projections look like? What do your stabilized margins look like? All of that stuff. We'll help you out with all of that here at Forecastr. We've also got a bunch of templates to make this a lot easier as well. So Mitch, if you can throw some templates in the chat, the forecastr.co/templates, that would be also a really good starting place for folks that are just kind of getting started with this type of stuff. So once you got everything put together, you're going to want to use it to understand how much money you should raise. And this is really going into the financial modeling for fundraising aspect of things. So it's pretty simple once it's complete, because you can see how negative your cash goes without a fundraise. And then you're just going to want to add a margin on top of that for safety. So this would give you a good idea for the minimum amount of money that you'd want to raise. So for example, if you're forecasting, hey, we're going to lose $1 million, you might want to raise 1.5 or something like that, just to have $500,000 a cushion, just in case you don't quite hit your forecast. So your forecast is also going to help you plan for how you're going to grow the company. So for your customer acquisition strategies, what are the individual things that you need to hit in order to hit your forecast? And then with all of your expenses, you're going to have a really clear use of funds as well. So it's going to basically check all the boxes for the investors. How are you going to grow? How are you going to spend money? What's your revenue going to look like? Once all that's done, you can take a snapshot of your financial model. You can put it in your investor deck, and then you can use that model later on in due diligence, and you can link it to your data room as well. We also recommend that you use your financial model to set up a one-on-one walkthrough meeting once you have an initial pitch meeting with an investor. So the first meeting is just get to know the investor, get them interested in your business. Further on down the line, you'll get into a new meeting, which is meant specifically to dig into the financials and the financial modeling behind your company. Now, I want to walk through what that meeting should look like really, really quickly. And I break this down into 3 separate parts, which are kind of obvious, but it's basically before the meeting, during the meeting, after the meeting. So before the meeting, and this is the due diligence meeting for financial model, we recommend that you do not send your financial model to your investors. And this is something that a lot of people have different opinions about. It's something that we at Forecastr actually feel pretty strongly on. You don't want a model live on its own. You need to control the narrative, and you want to present that model in person or on a call. And there's a couple reasons for this. It'll give you leverage to get the next meeting. So if they're interested in your business and they want to dig in, they need you to be in the room in order to dig in with them. It's also going to demonstrate your understanding of the model when you do present it live to them. And again, in showing your understanding of the model, you're showing your understanding of the business, because it's a simulation. So those 2 things directly translate. But the most important thing is that it allows you to really control the narrative. So when an investor or anybody first sees your model, they're going to start forming an opinion on it. And you really want to be there when that's happening so that you can control how that opinion is being formed. Because it's really easy for an investor to get the wrong impression of a model whenever they have no context on the model. And like it or not, once that first impression's made, it's super hard to change it, even if the thing that's giving them pause is something that's super, super explainable. So be there, be present, all of that whenever you're actually presenting the model. And when you're doing that, you really want to be in control. And this is a scary meeting for a lot of founders. People go into these meetings, they're ready for battle. They think, okay, now I'm going to defend my model against this big bad investor. They're going to try to tear it to shreds. Don't let that happen. It's a working session where you and the investor are working together, and you're using the model as a business tool to analyze what you think is realistic for your business. And that's the mindset that you need to be in. So you want to present what you think is realistic, and you're going to want to have a discussion about that. So if they have different opinions, model them out in real time, run different scenarios, be respectful of their opinions, ask about them, show you your input and your experience. And remember, it's a working session, so you're also trying to show the investor how well you can work together. So respond to their ideas, offer some ideas of your own, and you can present, but you can also treat it as a good brainstorming session as well. And if anybody asks like a really hard question and that you don't know the answer to, it's always okay to say, hey, I don't know, let me get back to you. That's always an acceptable answer. Then after the meeting, you're going to want to follow up. So summarize what you talked about in an email, include a copy of the model then, and if they ask for a specific scenario or a very hard question, get back to them at that point. So you're really just wanting to show them that the time was very meaningful. You enjoyed, running through this exercise with them, and you're really just trying to articulate that, hey, we work well together, I valued your time, all of that good stuff. If you want to earn brownie points, if they asked you a question that prompted you to do further analysis in the model, tell them about it, show them, that's a great way to earn brownie points, but you're really just wanting to show this was productive and it meant a lot to you. And then the last point, and then we'll get into the questions, is after you've secured the bag, so to speak, after you've gotten your investment, how do you want to actually now operationalize your financial model going forward to make sure that it's updated every single month? So one thing that we tell folks to do is update your financial model, make sure that actuals are put into it, and then you're going to want to compare that with what you forecasted. So it's called forecast versus actual analysis. It's really going to help you stay on track and identify individual variances within your model. And then you can update your model based on these variances and get super accurate, and therefore the model becomes more and more useful as time goes on. We also really encourage folks to run different scenarios, so it's always good to have base case, best case, worst case scenario, just so you know kind of the realm of different possibilities of permutations of your business. And then finally, we always say, use it as a reporting tool to your investors. It's one of the things that you use to help sell them on the investment, so it's a great reporting tool as well. So you're going to want to talk it over with your investors on a quarterly basis, use it for board reports. You can do it monthly as well, but you're going to want to use it as some level of a reporting tool. And that's pretty much all I got for you. And sorry that went a little bit longer. I like to keep maybe 15 or so minutes of questions, but we ran over just a little bit. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them now. But maybe even before we do that, I do want to note that everybody on this webinar is eligible for a 25% discount through Gust of Forecastr. So if you jump on and fill out the beta application if you want to meet with Mitch and the team, we will make sure that you get that 25% discount on your account.
Awesome. I want to jump back to one Q&A from way in the beginning. Thank you for being patient and sticking around, Anthony Garbarino. I'm going to offer you to unmute if you want to ask it yourself, but I can also read the question. So you really sparked people with churn. Anthony asks, if I'm an early stage company with no revenues, how important is to include potential churn? Raising a seed round and have revenue forecast but nothing official. Investors are aware of that, but curious as to how loosely I should put churn in the model when I basically don't have any ground information.
Yeah, it's important that you at that stage, whenever you're not generating revenue and you're just getting out and fundraising, you need to articulate that you're at least thinking about churn. You're recognizing that churn is something that needs to be on your radar, and you have a rough understanding and a rough expectation of what churn may be. It is important just to show that you're thinking about it, even though you may not have the best data on it. If you haven't launched yet, you have no data on it. Once upon a time, we had to build a financial model whenever we had zero data. You can bet that we still put churn in there though, just because if you're just showing a straight up month over month revenue growth with no churn or no kind of like logic behind it, to an extent that is somewhat, I don't want to say useless, but it's certainly not very useful, because just revenue growing month over month without any kind of attrition or churn or anything like that, I think we all know that that'll eventually end up just being a big number way out into the right. And I think what the investors at those stages are really more interested in, rather than the output of your financial model, is your understanding of the business model and your thought process behind how the business is going to grow and what reasonable assumptions are.
Yeah, and that's a generalizable answer for most things in startup land when things are very uncertain. The people that you're going to recruit to actually join you on your venture, whether they're co-founders, investors, advisors, early employees, you're going to have to tell them a story based on no data or very little data. And it's a far less important than like oh, this is exactly the right churn number, but rather the thought process that goes into it. We see this a lot with pitching, like things like market size. Most startups have a justifiable argument that the market they're going after is unsizable, or that sizing doesn't exist necessarily because they're innovative, they're introducing a new business model, they're creating a new market, the blue ocean strategy, all these kinds of things. But you can't just wave your hands and say like, well, we're creating a new market, so obviously we're billionaires. Putting some effort into like, hey, say we're a consumer products company with like a health focus. It's like, let's look at existing markets, right? I'm not a Deloitte analyst, so I'm not going to spend months like looking over things, but I can pull some meaningful things and say something to a potential investor that doesn't make them immediately think I'm naive or absolutely crazy. They need you to be a little bit crazy. In my experience, most founders have to be a little bit crazy, or they're probably not going to get investment or carry on. But that thought, if you're off by an order of magnitude or whatnot, you'll realize that as you go along. But the thought is really important. And honestly, for yourself, you have to convince yourself that there's something there. And sometimes you can plug some figures into a model and then realize, I use this example all the time, that like you need more customers than there are people on the planet in order for this to actually succeed. And these things happen. Like people, when you start to draw things out in a line to the right, the expectations and the compounding of them can get very unrealistic.
Yeah, I'll throw in 2 nuggets on there. One thing that I always tell people to say, especially whenever they're really early on, and even if they're later on, I always like to start things out by telling investors or whoever, the only thing I know about this financial model is that it's wrong. It's a great way to disarm them, because nobody thinks that every single projection that you have there is 100% gospel. Of course it's not. That's what forecasting is. It's a series of educated guesses. But it's really not meant for that. It's not meant to show me this is what I'm going to be making over time. This is 100% what is actually going to come into fruition. Of course, that's not true. It's a good probable estimate based off of your data. But what it's really meant to show you is just, this is my plan. This is what I'm planning on executing on based off of the information that I have. And that actually is valuable, to be able to show, these are my growth channels. This is when I'm going to be hiring people. This is what my revenue formula looks like. That's the interesting stuff. And that's the stuff that investors are going to want to really dig into. So.
Awesome. Thanks for the insightful responses, guys.
Yep.
Hey, thanks for your question.
Hey,
Liam.
Logan. So 2 questions on the pitch deck. So from Stacy, she's asking like, hey, like, what does the snapshot of the financials look like on a pitch deck? And then I'll kind of couple that with Kyle's similar question. He's asking about operating versus gross profit margins, like which would be better for him to show on a pitch deck.
Yep, great question. I would say, so we go over this in detail with the financial modeling for fundraising presentation that we give with Gust. So hopefully you guys will join us again for that one. Should be coming up hopefully next month. But I will generally answer by saying, don't go too deep in the weeds in a pitch deck. A pitch deck is at its core meant to just be like a 10, 12 slide presentation. You don't want to kill one of those slides with a million different numbers and a million different math equations. It's a great way to get analysis paralysis and number fatigue way too early on. The goal of the financial slide in the early pitch deck is to tease interest, right? Show them the opportunity is big, show them that you put some thought into it, to pose, you're trying to get them to ask the question, where did you get those numbers? And if they ask that question, then you can say, okay, well, here, let me set up another meeting to show you how I got those numbers. And that's where you want to be. You want to hook that next meeting. So keep it high level. Don't go super deep in the weeds with it in the pitch deck. And then to quickly answer the other question, operating versus gross margins, really depends. I say don't put too many numbers on a pitch deck. I would say if I had to pick one, gross margins are going to be more interesting probably to the investors, just because they can see kind of how that scales. You can really control operating margins a little bit easier. But both are going to be important. Eventually, you're going to need to show both if you get far enough along into due diligence. So,
hang on, I'm trying to find my unmute window. Awesome. And I had something to follow on there. What was it? Oh, pitch decks and almost any content is if you think about investor mindsets, you know, they're building a portfolio, they have an investment thesis. A lot of the no's you're going to get when you pitch investors are not like final judgment on your company, but rather your company just doesn't fit into their investment or their portfolio thesis. And so a lot of these numbers that you can put out there, you know, will allow investors to see like our follow-on conversation is going to be productive, right? If a company, you know, if an investor is looking for 30 to 60x returns, they only go after markets that support unicorns, et cetera, kind of a value-focused approach. Number go up and to the right is going to be important to them in so much as it matches the market they want. But there are investors from every cut of the cloth that would be looking at these kind of projections and need to trigger that next level of conversation. And that goes beyond financial modeling too. We've got, I gave you, Lee Honeywell the permission to unmute or whatever that feature is in case you wanted to have any follow on. No, she had to jump, never mind. But she sent me a very nice Twitter DM, by the way, Logan, saying that this stuff is fantastic. She wished she knew this from day one, or that she didn't even know this. She wished she knew she didn't know so that she could go find out.
Yeah, it's the stage of awareness. You start by not knowing what you don't know, and then you at least know what you don't know, and then you kind of move on from there. But it's yeah, I'm glad that she found value in it.
All right, Mitch, have you flagged any other ones that we should to bring up? To anybody asking about the general stuff, everybody should be sent a recording of this, the slide deck, a resource, the link to claim the discount and all that stuff. It'll go out about 2 hours after the event once everything's done processing. So just keep an eye on your email. If you don't get it, just email me, nash@gust.com. I will forward it to you. Mitch, I think I interrupted you.
No, you're all good. I was just saying, I don't think I see any other questions in chat here, so all good.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, only 2 minutes over despite the slight overage. Awesome. Thank you so much, Logan. And like you said, be on the lookout for future events like this. We are going to get probably a more trackable event calendar going because we've been having some great experiences and people have been coming to repeat events. And honestly, this Gust community and all of our partners are building is kind of like a great level up a founder at each thing. If you need financial modeling and you're ready for that kind of stuff, Forecastr is the team to do it. We're doing a tax event in 2 days, which is all about just paying your corporate taxes and understanding all that with our GBS partners. So hopefully we'll start to kind of build some wheels in this community machine. But for now, keep a look on your inbox for the next event. It should be just as good with a slightly different perspective. Any parting words, Logan and Mitch?
No, I don't think so. Not for me, but thanks everybody for joining. Love giving this talk. I would say be on the lookout. We'll be doing more events. Like I mentioned, the financial modeling for fundraising is another one that we like to give.
Super popular.
And the operational side of financial modeling, how to supercharge your business, is another one that we like to give here with Gust too. So yeah, thanks for joining.
Awesome. Thanks, Logan. Thanks, Mitch. Have a great rest of your week, everybody.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.